An unwanted guest. We live in a safe neighborhood. One of those places where everybody knows everyone, kids play freely in the streets, and a burglary is a rare occurrence talked about for months. I never thought I'd have a chilling story to share, but last week changed everything. It was a typical Tuesday evening. My wife and I had just tucked our kids into bed and settled in to watch our favorite TV show. We were laughing about something on the show when a loud crash echoed from downstairs. Startled, I muted the TV and listened. Silence. I looked at my wife, her face mirroring my concern. Was it one of the kids? Maybe they had knocked something over in their rooms. But as parents, we both knew that it wasn't the sound of a toy being dropped. It was something more serious. I decided to investigate, so I grabbed my old baseball bat and slowly crept downstairs. As I descended, I heard a muffled rustling from the living room. I gripped the bat tighter, my heart pounding in my chest. Peeking around the corner, I saw a tall figure rummaging through our drawers. He was a large man, dressed in dark clothes. The sight of an intruder in my home sent a chill down my spine. I felt violated, my sense of security shattered. Backing away, I quietly dialed 911 and reported the break-in. They assured me officers were on the way, but every minute felt like an eternity. I crept back upstairs, signaling to my wife that we had an intruder. She quickly gathered the kids and locked themselves in our bedroom. We remained as quiet as we could, listening to the intruder moving around downstairs. It felt unreal, like we were in some sort of terrible nightmare. Suddenly, we heard a loud thud, like someone falling, followed by an eerie silence. My heart skipped a beat. What had just happened? I waited for a few minutes, the silence gnawing at my nerves. Finally, gathering my courage, I decided to check again. Creeping downstairs, bat at the ready, I found the living room empty. Drawers were thrown open, their contents scattered, but the intruder was gone. That's when I saw him, lying motionless on the kitchen floor. But here's where it gets really strange. The intruder was out cold, sprawled out on the floor. But what really struck me as odd was the way he was lying. He was face down, with one arm outstretched towards the refrigerator. It looked as if he had suddenly collapsed while reaching for it. I stood there frozen, staring at the unconscious intruder. Then, I heard sirens wailing in the distance. A wave of relief washed over me. The police arrived shortly, their flashing lights bathing our quiet suburban street in a surreal glow. They quickly checked the intruder for signs of life. He was alive, just unconscious. They secured him in handcuffs and began searching him for any identification. But that wasn't the most bizarre part of the night. The police opened our refrigerator to see what the burglar had been reaching for. There, nestled between a carton of milk and a jar of pickles, was a small, ornate box. It was something I had never seen before. It wasn't ours. Inside the box was an old, faded photograph of a young woman and a handwritten note that read, "Forgive me, Alice." The police were as baffled as we were. Had the intruder brought the box? Was he trying to leave it in our house, or had he intended to take it? The questions kept piling up, and the intruder, still unconscious, offered no answers. The following day, we were informed that the intruder had no recollection of the break-in or the box. He had suffered a concussion, probably from a nasty fall, but otherwise was in good health. The mystery of the box still looms over our heads. The photograph and the note sparked numerous theories, but no concrete answers. The woman, Alice, remains a mystery too. There's no one by that name in our neighborhood, and no connections could be found between her and the intruder. The whole experience was frightening and surreal. Our home, once our safe haven, had been violated by an unknown man carrying an even more unknown box. We have since upgraded our security systems, and life is slowly getting back to normal. But the unanswered questions linger. Who was Alice? Why did the intruder have her photograph? What did he want with us? Sometimes the answers are even more frightening than the questions. And sometimes, like in our case, there are no answers at all.
Found a secret room in my new house. We recently moved into a new house, a quaint old Victorian manor tucked away from the hustle and bustle of city life. A real estate agent sold it to us at a price that was almost too good to be true. The house needed some renovations, but it was structurally sound. Little did I know the age of the house hid more than just aesthetic flaws. I'm a bit of a DIY enthusiast, and thought it would be a good idea to start exploring the house, see what I could fix up myself. So one evening after work, armed with a flashlight and a sense of adventure, I decided to check out the basement. The basement was typical of old houses. A musty smell permeated the air, cobwebs hung loosely in the corners, and it was full of old discarded furniture from previous occupants. As I was shining my flashlight along the far wall, a strange anomaly caught my eye. One part of the wall didn't seem to match the rest. The bricks were slightly darker and the pattern was just off. Intrigued, I walked over to get a closer look. I tapped on the section of the wall. It echoed in a hollow way that suggested that there might be a cavity or a room behind it. Heart pounding with excitement, I got to work tearing down the facade. What I found on the other side of that wall still sends chills down my spine. There was a room, a hidden room that wasn't listed in the house's layout. It was small, barely bigger than a closet, and the air was stale, like it hadn't seen daylight in decades. The room was sparsely furnished, containing just an old wooden chair, a table, and something that sent my heart into my throat. A large collection of women's jewelry spread out across the table. Necklaces, rings, earrings, all tarnished with age, but definitely real. Under the table, there was a small wooden box. Hands trembling, I opened it to find a stack of black and white photographs. The first few photos were of the house from different angles and some pictures of the surrounding area. But as I kept going through them, my blood ran cold. The pictures began to show young women, possibly in their early 20s, none of them smiling, all looking terrified. Even in the black and white photos, I could see the terror in their eyes. I noticed something else, too. The clothes they wore were not modern. They seemed to be from the early 1900s. I counted a total of 12 different women. I felt a chill crawl up my spine as I realized the implication of what I was seeing. I quickly boxed up the photos, left the room, and immediately called the local authorities. What had I stumbled upon? Was this house a relic of some heinous past? These questions raced through my mind as I waited for the police to arrive. When the officers arrived, I led them to the basement, all the while praying I was wrong about my assumptions. But what they found was far worse than what I had discovered. Upon entering the room, the officers shared a look of grave concern. I showed them the photographs and the jewelry I had found. Their expressions grew even more serious, and they started whispering among themselves. One of the officers finally turned to me and told me they would need to investigate this further, and advised me to leave the basement while they worked. Days turned into weeks as they thoroughly searched the house and the surrounding property. The local news picked up on the story, and soon the whole town was abuzz with whispers of the house's dark past. Forensic teams came in and combed the entire property for any evidence, leading to the most horrifying discovery yet. In the sprawling yard behind the house, they unearthed a series of shallow graves, all carefully lined up. The number matched the number of women in the photographs. The skeletal remains were confirmed to be of women in their early 20s, all of whom had disappeared mysteriously almost a century ago. Suddenly, the unusually low price of the house made horrifying sense. The former owners must have known about the house's sinister history, chose not to disclose it, and were probably desperate to get rid of the property. We were living in a house that had once been the hunting ground of a serial killer. The secret room, the photographs, the jewelry, it was all part of his macabre collection. The news hit us hard. We didn't just lose our dream house, we lost our sense of security. We felt violated, haunted by the knowledge of what had occurred within those walls. The women's terrified faces stared at me from the back of my eyelids every time I closed my eyes. The room, the chair, the table, the box of photographs, they all played in a chilling loop in my mind. We couldn't stay in that house any longer. We decided to move out, leave the town, and try to forget what we had stumbled upon. But even now, I cannot shake off the feeling of unease, the horrific knowledge of what people are capable of. What scares me the most is the thought that there might be more houses like ours out there, with their dark secrets waiting to be discovered. So if you ever find a house selling for a price too good to be true, think twice. You never know what's hiding behind those walls.
A hitchhiker from hell. I'm a long-haul truck driver. I've been driving across states for the past 15 years. In this line of work, you come across a variety of characters on the road, but there's one encounter that haunts me till this day. About 5 years ago, I was driving through the desolate roads of Nevada. It was late at night, and I was the only one on the highway. It was dark and eerily quiet. All I could hear was the low hum of my truck's engine and the occasional howl of the wind outside. Then, I spotted him, a lone figure standing by the side of the highway. He was a hitchhiker, something not uncommon in these parts. But there was something about this man that made me hesitate. He was tall, lanky, his silhouette barely illuminated by my truck's headlights. Something compelled me to stop. I pulled over and he climbed in. He thanked me, said his car broke down a few miles back, and he'd been trying to flag down a car for the last couple of hours. His face was gaunt, pale, with deep-set eyes that seemed to flicker in the dashboard light. He had an unsettling aura around him. However, I brushed off my initial reservations, thinking I was just tired and imagining things. We exchanged a few words, but he was mostly quiet, staring blankly out the window into the dark night. Occasionally, he'd look over at me, his dark eyes unblinking, and it felt like he was looking through me. I started feeling uncomfortable. I remember the silence in the truck cab becoming almost suffocating. I decided to switch on the radio, hoping to cut through the unsettling quiet. The radio crackled to life and I tuned into a news broadcast. The news anchor was reporting on a recent string of murders in the area. The victims were all truck drivers who'd been found brutally killed in their vehicles. My heart started racing as the anchor detailed the grim state of the victims. But what really froze my blood was when the anchor said that the suspect was believed to be hitchhiking along the same highway. The hitchhiker turned towards me, a slow, chilling smile spreading across his face. I felt my breath hitch in my throat. I was trapped in a moving vehicle with a potential serial killer. I could see the hitchhiker's smile widen in the corner of my eye. There was a gleam in his eyes that set every alarm bell ringing in my mind.
Interesting story, isn't it?
He asked, the tone of his voice so casual it sent shivers down my spine. As a long-haul trucker, you learn to trust your instincts, and my instincts were screaming at me to get out of there. But I was in the middle of nowhere, driving at 60 miles per hour with a man who might have killed multiple people. Panic started creeping in, but I knew I had to keep my cool. I had to think fast. Pretending to brush off his eerie comment, I casually mentioned a truck stop a few miles up ahead. I said I needed to stop for a coffee and a quick restroom break. He didn't say anything, just kept staring at me with that bone-chilling smile. As I approached the well-lit truck stop, I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. I parked the truck and said I'd be back in a few minutes. He didn't move, didn't say anything, just kept staring at me. I got out and quickly walked into the truck stop. I found the manager and urgently told him about the hitchhiker and my suspicions. The color drained from his face as he called the local authorities. We locked the truck stop's doors and waited anxiously for the police to arrive. The police arrived within minutes, their sirens piercing the quiet night. They found him still sitting inside my truck, looking eerily calm. Upon searching him, they found a long, sharp knife hidden in his jacket. Later, I learned that he was indeed the serial killer the news broadcast had talked about. He was linked to the murders of 6 other truck drivers who had been found brutally killed in the same area. I still shudder when I think about that night. What would have happened if I hadn't tuned into that news broadcast? What if I hadn't stopped at the truck stop? I was shaken to my core, a grim reminder of the dangerous, unpredictable world we live in. I still drive the long-haul routes, but I never stop for hitchhikers anymore. The memory of that night still haunts me. The chilling smile, the unblinking stare. It's a chilling reminder that danger often lurks where we least expect it.